Daniel Akaka has had many titles preceding his name, all attesting to a lifetime of public service. Cadet, corporal, principal, congressman, senator.
We have taken many positive steps to make our government a better reflection of the American people.
His life has been intertwined with America's history, from the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Looked up and I saw the sunball on the wings.
To the attacks on September 11th, and he's helped shape that history from the Pacific battles of World War II to the highest circles of power in Washington, D.C.
I think he was first and foremost an advocate for Hawaii.
I could not find one senator, Republican or Democrat, who ever had a bad word to say about Danny Akaka.
The election ushers in a new era in the nation's capital, but Akaka doesn't want his departure to mean that the spirit of the islands is leaving the halls of Congress.
And the kind of leadership that's important is Hawaiian-style leadership.
Tonight, we reveal the remarkable public and personal life of Daniel Akaka, the Aloha statesman. Aloha, I'm Terry Okita from Capitol Hill, where for nearly 36 years, Hawaii voters have sent Senator Daniel Akaka to work on their behalf. Tonight, a look at the senator's early life and political career, how family, faith, and aloha have shaped his legislative decisions, and how at 88 years old, he's still going strong. On a rainy day in Honolulu, Senator Akaka visits a memorial plaque at Kamehameha schools.
Louis Agard, Richard Blaisdell, Henry Awana, it's all my classmates, Carl Bodie.
Akaka's own name is there, along with 28 other students from the School for Boys who searched for Japanese paratroopers in hiding after the Pearl Harbor attack. He's also at the Kapalama campus to see his dorm room for the first time in 70 years.
Oh my, that's it.
Has it changed
No,
much?
it's, see, we could look through here and see Pearl Harbor. We climbed on this roof here, out here to watch it.
Were you scared?
Well, we were surprised. You know, we really didn't know what was happening.
That event changed the course of the country and Akaka's life.
A date which will live in infamy.
But long before December 7th, 1941, many of his character traits had already been defined. On September 11th, 1924, Daniel Kahikina Akaka was born to parents Anuenue and Kahikina. He was the youngest of 8 children delivered in their 2-bedroom Pauoa home.
I still remember as a little child that I slept on a bed next to my mother and dad, but they slept on the floor.
Religion and music played a prominent role in his upbringing. They prayed and sang hymns as a family every morning and evening.
Danny was brought up in a strong Christian family. That's part of him. That's who he is.
They recited devotions in either English or Hawaiian, but Akaka remembers his parents and elders whispering Hawaiian, the result of a law that allowed children to be punished if they spoke the language in school. Hiding a part of their culture was just one hardship. The money his father earned went first to the church, and sometimes there wasn't enough left for little Daniel's school lunch. He and his brothers didn't even have shoes until they were in high school.
I remember one time crying, and my mother said, "Oh, why are you crying?" So I said, "Oh, look at this puka pants. I mean, I'm going to school with these puka pants." And she said, "That's all right. You know, it's clean."
His esteemed brother, the Reverend Abraham Akaka, became pastor of the family church Kauai'ahao, and Daniel served for 17 years as the choir director. Reverend Akaka delivered the statehood address in 1959, not knowing then that his younger brother would represent the newborn state for more than 2/3 of its existence. The young Akaka went to Pauoa Elementary and then Kawananakoa Middle School, foreshadowing his political career by serving as class president at age 14.
I thought about, getting into politics slightly. I didn't even dream of being a U.S. Senator.
He was the only one in his family to attend Kamehameha. After graduation in 1944, he shipped off to war, leaving Honolulu Harbor for the vast Pacific.
It was at Pier 7. Remember, troop ship was there. When I came up, they said, Akaka. And then I would say, Daniel K.
He served in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Saipan and Tinian and recalls some of the terrible things he saw.
The Japanese military told the families, made them fear the Americans. And so they hid in caves, and even there was a cliff there that where they would take their families and walk over the cliff.
Akaka served for several years after the war, but tried to escape the feeling that something was wrong by traveling alone to the neighbor islands. He felt bad for leaving his mother.
She wanted me home, and yet when I got home, I didn't want to stay home.
Akaka credits the GI Bill for helping him cope with what he now knows was PTSD. He focused on school, earning a degree in education. Many don't know that prior to politics, he worked an entire career as an educator and administrator. In the early 70s, he worked for the state and in Governor George Ariyoshi's office. The one constant throughout his life has been his wife, Mary Mildred Chong. They met at the Hawaiian Junior Civic Club, and for 19-year-old Millie, it was love at first sight.
I thought, well, this is the person I want to be with. The poor guy, he didn't have a chance.
The couple married on May 22nd, 1948. They raised 5 children in Hawaii: Milani, Dan Jr., Alan, Gerard, and Nicholas. As their children grew, Akaka took on more responsibility and began the transition into politics. Soon, he would be elected to Washington, and those new duties would mean time away from Millie and the kids.
Very often I was on a run, I was on a go, and so I really, give you so much credit for bringing up our children.
Ma and Pa, as they're now called, have 15 grandchildren and 15 great-grandchildren, with another due in February. The years away from family, in large part, prompted his decision to retire.
After we had a family gathering in Hawaii, I met many of my great-grandchildren, and some of them for the first time I was seeing them, I didn't know their names or their parents, who they belonged to. And boy, that affected me because I felt, wow, I don't even know my grandkids. Maybe it's about time I come home.
Now, the Akakas are traveling back to their family and home, where he will be a private citizen for the first time in 36 years. When we come back, Akaka's political accomplishments over the decades and the legacy he leaves behind.
You're watching the Aloha Statesman, a Hawaii News Now special presentation.
Senator Akaka has racked up more than 2 million frequent flyer miles. The route here to Washington began in the bicentennial, 1976, when he won Hawaii's Congressional District 2 seat. He served in the House for 14 years.
I do.
In May 1990, after the death of Spark Matsunaga, Governor John Wahe'e appointed him to the U.S. Senate.
Without question, this is the most exciting day of my life.
But come autumn of that year, Akaka launched into what he calls the toughest campaign of his career.
And so for this election, I ask you to stand with me.
A special election against Republican Pat Saiki.
To Dan Akaka, I say, please stop distorting my record.
He brought in a big gun to Hawaii to campaign alongside him.
Give them Danny Akaka back in the United States Senate.
Colleague and friend, Senator Ted Kennedy.
He said, Danny, I want to help you.
The seasoned politicians would even sing Itsy Bitsy Spider to a group of Hawaii school kids.
Itsy Bitsy Spider climbs up the water spout.
With Kennedy's help, Akaka won that hard-fought race, and over the decades would be re-elected another 3 full terms.
And he is the first native Hawaiian, a Polynesian to serve in this body, the first Native American to
serve in this body.
He's also the only senator of Chinese descent, and his cultural identity has been the driving force behind much of his legislation. He was instrumental in getting President Bill Clinton to sign the 1993 Apology Resolution into law, acknowledging the U.S. overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
I would say 100% of the senators here know the history of Hawaii because Senator Akaka has made sure.
And for more than a decade, he's worked tirelessly, yet unsuccessfully, for federal recognition of Native Hawaiians with legislation commonly known as the Akaka Bill. Its failure to pass has been one of his biggest disappointments.
I've never been able to get that bill to the floor of the Senate. And the reason is there's always one objection, and if there's an objection, that's it, it's out.
Akaka says it boils down to race and the impression the bill shows favoritism to Native Hawaiians. Some politicos believe if Akaka had been in the Senate during an era of greater compromise, he could have pushed the bill through.
The 90s and now, it's just harder to get parochial stuff passed because it looks like you're looking out only for a special interest.
Of course, Congress has changed in 3 decades. We now hear of more partisanship and gridlock in Washington. But Senator Akaka remembers a time when a gentleman's agreement meant everything.
My fellow senators, I extend to each one of you my warmest aloha.
Since he first walked the halls of Congress, this quiet statesman has been the political ambassador of aloha.
Oh, yeah, aloha!
Time and again, members and staff stop to shake hands and talk story with the senator. And it's not often you hear this exchange between a Democrat and a Republican.
Love you, buddy.
Hey, you're looking good, and love you too.
What are you going to miss most about Washington?
My friends and my colleagues. You know, we've had such good relationships over the years.
Although considered to be quite liberal, he's the last of what some call a bygone generation in the Senate, when lawmakers figured out how to create personal connections with political friends and foes alike, and use them to forge compromises on big bills.
This is one of the best people we've ever had here.
That from conservative Republican Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions, who attends weekly prayer breakfasts with Akaka.
You got a lot of people with a lot of talk and no action. He's one of those guys that talks softly and gets results.
Terrible temper. Oh, wait a minute, that's a different senator. That's a different senator. No, Danny Akaka, probably the greatest gentleman in the Senate.
The one lawmaker he worked with the longest, Hawaii's revered former Senator Daniel Inouye. Inouye's recent passing affected Akaka deeply.
But this chamber will never be the same without him.
Some have wondered if it was difficult for Akaka to be the state's junior senator for so many years. Until the very end, Akaka was always proud to be on what he called Dan's team.
There are some members who wouldn't like that and would, end up fighting with him because they want to get credit for things. He's always been, if you can get this for Hawaii, I want to help you. You tell me what I can do to help get this for Hawaii.
Before he passed away, Inouye told us it comes down to a matter of legislative style, and Akaka's approach embodies Hawaii.
One of the most conscientious, however, the least partisan member of the U.S. Senate any of us have ever known. Oftentimes, his gentle demeanor could be misunderstood, that he's weak, but he is actually a very strong fellow.
Inouye added his longtime friend and colleague stands by what he believes in, something he admired in this era of fair weather politics. In the wake of 9/11, for instance, in 2002, Akaka was one of only 23 senators to vote no to going to war in Iraq.
Some felt I was being unpatriotic, but I felt, no, it's not going to help our country.
Despite his opposition to the Iraq War itself, he visited U.S. troops there in 2006 and in Afghanistan in 2004.
God bless America, my home sweet home.
And if his patriotism was questioned, it was short-lived. Capitol Hill colleagues across the board say veterans have no bigger champion than the former World War II soldier.
There will never, ever, ever be another Senator Akaka. There's no question about that. Senator Akaka's legacy, without question, will be Veterans Affairs.
For 4 years, he chaired the Veterans Affairs Committee and in 2007 helped pass the largest single year of funding for the Veterans Administration. In 2010, he authored and sponsored the Caregivers and Veterans Omnibus Health Services Act, which allows family caregivers of wounded troops to receive salaries if they quit their jobs to care for loved ones. He also brought attention to the invisible wounds of PTSD, something, remember, he experienced firsthand after the war. Frank Lautenberg, now the only current senator who served in World War II, says Akaka distinguished himself on veterans issues.
People will look at how the veterans are treated and will use the Akaka example to say, look, you serve and you will be taken care of where your needs are created.
But politics, as they say, is a contact sport, and the senator has been in the business long enough to know criticism comes with the territory. In 2006, Time magazine named Akaka one of the country's 5 worst senators, the master of the minor. The article disparaged him for sponsoring a handful of innocuous resolutions and unambitious bills that died in committee.
And I do it with respect, but I do it with honesty. That Senator Akaka's career has not been marked by significant achievement.
That same year, Ed Case challenged Akaka for his Senate seat. It was a controversial move within the local Democratic Party, and in the end, Akaka won by 7 points. The seasoned politician says opponents and the media often come with their own agendas.
Disappointing sometimes, you know, when you, of course, very often you disagree, but that's all you do.
You know, there have been times when people have said things that were untrue about his legislation, and I've wanted to push back harder. But he's always, you know, his first rule is, you know, be nice.
Criticism often falls hardest on the families. Mrs. Akaka, who considers herself the original Tiger Mom, remembers back in the early days when a constituent got hold of their home phone number and called their house to complain about her husband.
So finally I told one fella, I said, you know, if you're so smart, why don't you run for the office?
Their daughter, Milani, overheard the conversation.
Says, Ma, I don't think Dad's going to make it if you keep telling these people where to go. I said, okay. But he's been in 36 years, so. Different
senators get their job done in different ways. Some are out front, some are show horses, some are workhorses. Senator Akaka was just a quiet force.
While he was most visible on veterans issues, Native Hawaiian rights, and as chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee, the senator also fought hard on other matters, like stopping target practice on Kaho'olawe.
We have called for an end to the bombing. We have been rebuffed. We can no longer continue to wait.
In the 1980s, as chairman of the House Space Caucus, a forward-thinking Akaka pushed for commercializing space activities.
Liftoff.
Something quite common today, but virtually unheard of 30 years ago.
I spoke about bringing in the private sector, which NASA wasn't happy.
He's also been a strong supporter of financial literacy and is credited with something you may see on your monthly financial statements, known in banking circles as the Akaka box.
And it's a box on credit card statements that clearly identifies the interest that you will pay if you defer your payments.
Whether he's chairing a hearing or hustling off to vote, politicos describe him as a lawmaker who's always advocating for Hawaii's people. And the doors to his D.C. office are open wide to island constituents.
Thank you so much.
Mr. and Mrs. Akaka don't just shake hands. They sit and talk story in his Senate office with their visitors. And the ever-popular Millie Akaka, in her mu'u-mu'u and bare feet, makes the locals feel right at home.
I turn around, there was the audience with shaka signs.
The senator likes to tell constituents about one of the times he rode aboard Air Force One with President Barack Obama.
I was so surprised. I looked at the menu, and I looked around. I thought, gee, I wonder who else knows. There it was on the menu. The main dish was manapua.
In all, Senator Akaka has served with 6 presidents.
And who do I get a call from? President Reagan.
He's gone fishing with Jimmy Carter and hit the links with Clinton.
Senator Akaka is a dedicated golfer and one of my favorite golf companions.
For almost 4 decades, Senator Akaka has been on the front lines of our nation's history and helped shape much of it. Now, he and his wife are drafting a new bit of history. Only this time, it's much more personal. What's next for the Akakas? In just a moment.
You're watching the Aloha Statesman, a Hawaii News Now special presentation.
Each morning, the Akakas make the trek into Washington together from their Virginia home. You don't see many spouses on the Hill during work hours, but the senator likes his Millie close by. Time has ticked down to retirement day when, after all these years, the senator's name will no longer be the first one announced at a quorum vote.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
And he'll no longer have to juggle staff meetings, group conferences, and committee hearings.
I know that he's going to miss this job. He says it, and I know he means it.
Generations of staff, members, and workers will miss him too, like the fellow in charge of the Capitol cloakroom, who relayed this anecdote to Hawaii Congresswoman Colleen Hanabusa.
His dad was the head of the cloakroom before him. And he said, you must not forget Senator Akaka, because Senator Akaka is everything that can be good about Congress.
In spare rooms in Akaka's office, 36 years of memories and awards were stacked to the rafters.
Every paper that the senators ever used, every draft of every speech, every news clip, everything, it's all been saved. Every letter people send us.
The Akaka papers will go to the National Archives, the Library of Congress, and a special room at his alma mater, the University of Hawaii. After a life already fully realized, the 88-year-old is reflective about aging, dying, and even the afterlife. He is not fearful of death. Rather, he's comforted by his faith in God.
You know, when our life may be ended on earth, and in a sense, because of my background and all, I look forward to that.
And Akaka has no plans to slow down in retirement. He's open to whatever comes next in Hawaii, especially if it allows him to pass the torch.
Because of the experiences I've had, I want to make myself available. You know, if I can mentor some people, I'd be happy to do that.
Senator Daniel Akaka, husband, father, grandfather, patriot, educator, politician. He is, in every sense of the word, the Aloha Statesman.
You know, in life there are seasons, you know, and revealed by the seasons. It's good for life. And I thought maybe it was a season for me, you know, that I've served in this capacity. And I felt this has been a privilege and honor. And I also want to thank the people of Hawaii, because I know very well if they didn't support me all these years, I wouldn't be here.
And so the Akaka's 36-year journey to our nation's capital comes to a close. Now the road home leads to Ohana and their beloved Hawaii. Reporting from Washington, I'm Terry Okita. Thanks for watching. Aloha and good night.
If I had to choose a life again the next time I come back, I hope it'd be with the same husband and the same children.
It's been a real honor to get to work with him.
And I suppose there would be some who say that that's not, you don't use the word beautiful and man in the same sentence, but in my eyes, he's a beautiful man.
I couldn't be prouder of knowing Dan Akaka.
Senator Akaka, you know, well done, my friend. Aloha, oi.
The greeting we're going to miss. Aloha.
With much aloha that I say to you now, ahui ho. This hearing is adjourned.